Changing a fuel filter on the Kia Ceed GT. First of all, you have to take out the 4 screws and place them safely to one side. Then that's where you will get to your flap, and then you'll disconnect the connector from here. So you've got to push it down on the top and then pull up. And you can slide that just to one side. Now, when you remove this, you will get a residual bit of fuel pouring out. So you don't have to worry about that too much. Just do it slow and then just let it dribble out and you'll be okay. It's not always easy to get straight away. So so as you push it in, then you push the blue bit down. That's it. See the little bit of fuel? What I didn't have handy, it was right beside me, as I didn't have my cloth. So when you're doing that, you should actually put the cloth right beside it and then do that. And then cover it as it's doing it, and then it relieved the pressure. And once it's relieved all the pressure, there you go. What you can do is do it while in the morning when you haven't started the car, you haven't moved it, then that way you're not going to have as much pressure and you don't have to have as much fuel pouring out either. All you do is you just give that a quick wipe, and now that cable can go out of the way, and that wet rag can go over the back. Get some fresh rag. Cover always moves around, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. And then just dry up any more residual spills there so it's a bit drier. And then what you'll do, you'll take off the 8 bolts. Let me get a light on quick. So you'll take off these 8 bolts all the way around, going very slow just in case they're seized on. But I've had these off before for my last fuel filter change, and normally put copper seals on them just to help this in the future. So I'll get that off and then I'll resume the video. Now you've got all the bolts undone, what you'll want to do is pull it out straight, but you've got to be careful because you'll have a little bit of excess fuel in there. And you're not really able to, let me make it wide angle. And you're not really able to get rid of the excess fuel because it sits around the side. And then you've got your float along the side. So what I should have said is at the start is don't have a lot of fuel, because otherwise you'll have so much of this coming out. You'll tilt it to a side so it starts pouring the excess out as much as possible. And in that way you can then get your filter and float out. Just like that. Now when you haven't got a phone in your hand, it's much easier. But when you've got a phone in your hand, It's not as easy. And then there you go. That's your fuel filter right on top here. So now you got to take all of this apart, which I'll do in a bit. Once you've got that out, you'll pour the excess fuel that you've got out here. You don't need that anymore. And then you'll go and remove this clip here. Like so, and keep that safe to one side. Then very gently, as this is down, you need to just pry this little bit of plastic up and push these shafts all the way up. Now you've got to be careful because it's plastic, and as we know, plastic breaks, and once it's been in fuel for a very long time it can become brittle. So you've got to do it very gently, just enough to get that through, and then you'll do the other side at the same time. I'll continue this video this way around and I'll try and get you to step through it. So now you've got this top bit off, there's an O-ring washer that sits in the top here. You'll want to take that out and you'll want to place that ready on your new filter right on the top. But you don't have to do that right this second, you can do it just before you're installing it. I get it there just out of the way so it's nice and safe, and then I'll come back to that later. Now you've got all of that apart, you've got another plastic clips all the way around. They're a bit of a pain in the ass because you need to pry them up while lifting, obviously not snapping. There you go. So now you've got all three done. You can remove that out of the way. Remove the little clip connector. There's a little tab on there which is a locker. Now this is separate. One thing that you'll do is you'll look inside of here and you'll see how dirty it is. If you've got a lot of debris in there, you'll flush it out. I actually don't have much because I flushed it out last time. I've only got 3 bits in here, which is quite nice compared to the first time I did it, which I had loads sitting in there. So that's not a lot, which is really good, really nice and clean. I'll also make sure that the suction flapper is working still, and then that is all you'll do on that, so it looks like this again. Put that to one side. Now you've got the extra little bits which become a bit more of a faff and a fiddle. So you've got your pressure regulator, which is actually built into the whole system, so it's not on a fuel rail, it's not separate, it's actually built into the fuel filter. It's an annoying thing, I will say that. Let me just grab my rag because it's leaking again. So with the regulator built in, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. You've got another thing to get off, another plastic clip which you've got to get off. So you can get your thumb underneath the bottom one, just pry that up. Get your screwdriver underneath the top one, pry that up just enough, and then you'll see it flip. Then underneath the front here, you just get your flathead underneath it and just pry it off a little bit more. Sometimes it wants to go first time, sometimes it doesn't want to go. It depends on how it wants to feel. No, wait, it just clips back on. Sometimes it likes to work for you straight away, but then other times it doesn't. Let me grab another type screwdriver out. I'll do double prying on it. Noob today doesn't want to go. Oh, did I get it? Maybe. Oh, there we go. So there you go, there's the back end off. There you go, nearly off. Go on. There. So you've got your retainer ring, and you can just wiggle, twist, and pull that out. You've got an O-ring behind there, and a spacer, plastic spacer behind there. Now you've got to get the top bit off, or sorry, bottom bit where you've got your fuel sock. So again, there's a couple of clips on there. You've got to just pry up ever so gently. This is probably the worst bit actually, because you can't actually easily get in all of the locations very easy. It takes a little finesse work to get it all in. Right, there's one. Two. And there's three. Right. This is when you start leaking more fuel. So make sure you've got plenty of rag around. Right, so now you've pushed your fuel pump out, which is this diddy little thing here. Let me come down here, because there's a couple of things in here. You need to get this O-ring, you need to get that O-ring out, put that to one side. There's a sleeve for the fuel pump which you need to push out. And then what just dropped out there is a plastic spacer which has got holes in the side, and then you've got an O-ring right at the top here, which that needs to come out as well. And then that is your old filter, and actually this one is fairly clean compared to my first one that I did, which was at 40,000 miles. I'm now at 72,000 miles, so I'm a little bit early, but I like to be ahead of everything. So now everything goes back into your new one. So you'll get your O-ring back in here. Actually, you don't have to put this one in first straight away. There is a trick. You can put the O-ring on your regulator and push it in that way. You don't have to put it in first. There are actually more than one way of doing certain things, so it depends on how you want to do it. If you find it tricky putting the O-ring in first, sometimes it doesn't quite sit round it, like has a raised edge up. So you can do that last if you wish. So the O-ring that came off with the spacer is on the top of the fuel pump. So you'll place it on there like so. If it zooms, don't know if it will focus enough. And then with your little rubber seal, you'll push that until it locates into the seat, into the bottom here. Alright, that rubber on the inside is a pain because it has to seat around the gap, and it's a tiny gap, around the fuel pump and the actual housing, and you have to line up the gap that's in here. So then you've got two prongs here. You've got one that side and one here, and they obviously need to poke through. So yeah, it's a bit of a pain in the ass doing that, but you get there. Fuel pressure regulator back on, twist it on, goes on nice and tight. Retainer goes on first a little bit. Then make sure the O-ring is in the back of this. And if you want to make sure it seats properly, take the O-ring out, put it on top of here first, and then push it on so it seats nicely again. And then while holding this, you'll push this retaining ring back over, and then that's where it sits again. When you start putting stuff back together, apart from that little bit at the bottom here, you'll start thinking, well, why was that so hard getting it off? It's always hard getting it off. It's very easy going back together. Ugh. So now you get your housing again. You get your little sensor, clip that back on. Making sure this seats with the O-ring, that's inside of here. So you've always got to make sure that goes in the correct way. Again, if you want to make sure it seats, take the O-ring out, put it on the base, and then seat it, so then you know it's an exact fit. So then that's all clipped back in. And you can put your connector back on for the pump, like so. Then you get your top connector, plug that back in. Get that top bit seated and connected. Put your retaining clip back inside of here. Then you'll put all your wires up through the little holder. Then you can push that down and then it comes through. So that is now a completely changed fuel filter. Make sure that you've done all your connectors up, all your wires are away, and nothing is going to start causing any problems. When it's situated away. And then install is the reverse of taking it out. Now what you'll do is you'll turn it on and you'll just prime it a couple of times. So then turn it back off.
Recording will now start. GPS connected.
And then every time you do that, you'll hear the fuel pump kick in.
Network whose name starts with Thinkware.
So do that about 3 times. And then it might take a little while to have a start. No, there you go. So that's the whole entire job. And one safety thing you can do is once it's now running again, get yourself back in here and just check to make sure that you've got no fuel leaks. These little bolts are only nipped up by hand. They're only M5s. They're very, very small. You just nip them. If you do any more, you'll risk snapping them. So no fuel leaks, so we're all good. New fuel filter, all done.